Every woman is a symbol, never just herself. That is her power. Carl Jung. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. He sat alone, in the dark, staring at the wall that has long ceased to be just a wall. It became a screen for memories, illusions, fantasies that once promised salvation. She wasn't there anymore, but something of her still lingered. Not in the room, but in him. This wasn't heartbreak. This was collapse. Not from betrayal, not even from love lost, but from a deeper fracture, one that began the moment he gave her something he didn't understand himself, his power, his identity, his very center. Carl Jung saw this, and he warned, not about a specific woman, but about the archetype, the force, the feminine that lives not only outside, but within every man. He called it the anima, a presence that seduces not with touch, but with resonance. She speaks the language of dreams, of longings, of silent wounds. And when a man does not know her, she owns him. The world tells men to pursue women, to win them, to impress, to seduce. But the truth is far more dangerous. When a man meets a woman, he doesn't meet her. He meets the mirror of his unconscious. He meets everything he has repressed, denied, buried. Desire is never just desire. It's a map, and she holds the compass. The feminine is not soft, not safe. She is chaos wrapped in skin. She can nurture or devour, build or dissolve. She can make a man feel like a god and then leave him crawling in the ruins of his own delusion. And she doesn't have to do anything to achieve this. All she has to do is reflect what's already inside him, his longing, his shame, his hunger to be seen, touched, loved, not just by her, but by himself. That's the trap. He thinks she is the answer, that if he can have her, love her, possess her, he will finally become whole. But what he doesn't know is that she's not a destination. She's a test, a mirror, a gatekeeper, a force of nature sent to show him who he really is. Jung understood that the feminine isn't merely a gender. It's an archetype of psychic energy, seductive, fluid, wild. And when a man is unconscious of it, he projects it onto women. He turns them into symbols, goddesses. He worships them, needs them, collapses for them. And then, when they don't match the image, he hates them. Not because they failed, but because the illusion broke. Because he mistook the reflection for the source. There is nothing more dangerous for a man than an unknown anima, because she doesn't just shape his dreams. She defines his desires, and if he hasn't met her within, he'll chase her without, again and again, woman after woman. Each one more hypnotic, more impossible, more consuming, until there's nothing left of him. She's not evil, she's not good, she's primal, a force. And like all forces, she demands respect. The man in the room begins to see this, slowly, in the silence, in the aftermath, not of love, but of illusion, not of betrayal, but of blindness. The woman who left was never the danger. The danger was what she awakened. She doesn't need to speak. Her presence is enough. A glance, a slight move of the hips, a breath, a pause. It's not manipulation, not in the way people think. It's deeper, biological, ancient, a current older than words. Science has already confirmed it. During arousal, a man's brain changes. Dopamine floods the system. Logic dims. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for critical thinking, slows down. Testosterone rises. The need to act, to claim, to conquer takes over. And in that moment, she becomes the world. Not because she asked for it, but because his system responds as if his survival depends on her, as if she is the final answer to all the hunger he's been carrying since childhood. Touch, recognition, worth. This is not romance. This is power. Across cultures, across time, men have feared this power. Entire religions, entire societies were built around controlling it. Veils, rules, taboos. Not because women are evil, but because men are vulnerable to beauty, to scent, to softness, to the unspoken promise of being chosen. Jung didn't speak only of myth. He spoke of biology wrapped in story, the feminine as both mother and temptress, saint and seductress, a force that lifts or burns. When a man sees a woman and feels like he needs her, really needs her, something ancient is speaking inside him. Not love, not connection, but dependency. And this is where danger lives, because the more he needs, the more he loses ground. The more he idealizes, the more blind he becomes. She doesn't need to trap him. He walks into the cage himself, smiling, offering the key. It starts with attraction, but it deepens into projection. She becomes everything: healer, savior, purpose. She becomes his son, and he forgets that she's just human. This is not her fault. It's his failure to see her clearly. And then, when reality returns, when she doesn't heal him, doesn't save him, the disillusionment is brutal. He calls her cold, manipulative, cruel. But it was never about her. It was about the spell, the sexual spell that turned her into a goddess and him into a worshipper. Sexual power is not about dominance. It's about energy. She carries it like fire. She may not even know what she's doing, but her walk, her gaze, her voice, they awaken something buried. If he doesn't know what that something is, it controls him. And that is the true danger. Not her, but his ignorance. Not her sexuality, but his lack of integration. The split between mind and body, shadow and self. She becomes the trigger, but the explosion, that's his. She doesn't shout. She doesn't need to raise her voice. Her power lies in subtlety, a pause before answering, a look that says more than words ever could, a silence that forces him to explain himself, justify himself, doubt himself. From the beginning of time, she survived not through strength, but through perception. Evolution shaped her brain to scan, to read, to intuit. Micro-expressions, tone shifts, emotional undercurrents. She feels what he hides before he even knows he's hiding it. This is not manipulation as strategy. It's instinct. When a woman wants something, she doesn't always demand. She implies. She creates space where the man begins to bend, not because she forces him, but because he wants to please. He wants to be seen. He wants to be enough. She says, "Be a man." And he straightens his spine. She says, "If you really loved me," and suddenly he's negotiating with his own boundaries. She says nothing, just a change in energy. And he feels like he's failed. This isn't evil. This is psychology. Studies have shown women outperform men in social intelligence. They are better at reading emotions, adapting strategies, sensing weaknesses. Not because they train for it, but because survival demanded it. And now, in modern life, this gift becomes power. Men often don't see it coming, because the battlefield isn't visible. It's not fists, it's frames, narratives, emotional leverage. She frames herself as the one who suffers. She turns every confrontation into proof of his failure. And if he hasn't faced his own guilt, his own wounds, he folds. He apologizes for things he never did. He explains himself endlessly. He walks on glass. All she did was cry. All she did was withdraw. All she did was wait. And he collapsed. Carl Jung understood this dynamic. He saw that what manipulates us most is not the external force, but the internal vacuum, the hole inside, the emptiness. And a woman, simply by being near, can awaken that emptiness. She becomes the answer to a question he never asked out loud. And that's where the danger lies, not in her will to control, but in his need to be controlled. Because deep down, some part of him wants it, wants her to decide, to lead, to mother, to fix, and she will, until he's no longer a man, just a boy with a broken compass. Psychological manipulation doesn't always look like cruelty. Often, it wears the mask of love, concern, softness, but behind it hides a simple truth. He lost himself trying to keep her, and she never asked him to. She only watched as he gave everything away. Society wraps women in softness. From childhood, we're told they are gentle, nurturing, peaceful by nature. Girls are sugar and flowers. Women are caretakers, victims, lovers. But underneath this cultural layer lies something older, something raw. Every ancient myth knew it. The Greeks had Medusa, a woman whose gaze turned men to stone. The Hindus had Kali, goddess of time, destruction, and transformation. Even the Bible whispered of Lilith, the first woman who refused to submit, who left paradise on her own terms. She is not weak, she is not innocent, she is chaos in form. The feminine has always carried a dual face. She nurtures, but she also devours. She loves, but she tests. She births life, and she watches it fall. And men who don't understand this live in danger, not because she hides it, but because he refuses to see. The danger is not that she lies. The danger is that she shows who she is, but he is blind to it. He looks at her body and imagines comfort. He hears her voice and thinks of safety. He sees the surface, curves, beauty, softness, and believes it means peace. But peace is not her nature. Her nature is movement, fire, change. She can destroy with a whisper, not through violence, through silence, through withdrawal, through rejection, through absence. And the man who tied his worth to her presence begins to fall apart without a single blow. This isn't a story of villainy, it's a story of power, invisible power. And power that is invisible is the hardest to confront. Culture allows women to wield emotional weapons without ever being held accountable. A man who shouts is dangerous. A woman who manipulates emotions is just emotional. A man who controls is abusive. A woman who controls through tears, through distance, through guilt, she's just sensitive. This double standard keeps men confused, keeps them questioning themselves, keeps them silent. And in that silence, she gains control, not by demand, by default. Men are taught to protect women. But who protects men from women's shadow side, from her inner storm, from her ability to twist perception without ever raising a hand? No one talks about it, because to question female innocence is to violate a cultural script. But the truth is written in thousands of quiet breakdowns, in men who lose themselves trying to save a woman who never needed saving, in men who were crushed by something they couldn't even name, not because she wanted to break him, but because he refused to see her as whole, light and dark, love and rage, beauty and power. The myth of female innocence is not just false, it's dangerous, because it blinds men to the full truth. And a man who is blind will always walk into fire thinking it's light. The numbers are there, buried in quiet reports, hidden behind academic language, ignored by media narratives that only tell one side. But they exist, and they speak. Men suffer more than we're allowed to admit. Studies from respected institutions, Cambridge, Harvard, Stanford, all point to the same conclusion. Emotional abuse, psychological control, and manipulation by women are not rare. They're just invisible, because the wounds aren't on the skin, they're under it. A man cries and is called weak. A man breaks and is told to toughen up. A man says, "She hurt me," and people laugh. But the science doesn't laugh. It measures. Men report high levels of emotional blackmail in relationships, silent treatment, guilt-tripping, public shaming. Not just occasionally, systematically. These patterns break down self-esteem, reshape identity, erode masculinity. In domestic violence reports, a quiet statistic hides. A significant percentage of men are victims, but their stories are footnotes or erased completely because it doesn't fit the narrative. Society doesn't have a space for the wounded man, especially when the wound comes from a woman. And so he stays silent. He tells no one that she controls who he talks to, that she uses affection as reward, that she punishes with withdrawal, that she humiliates behind closed doors, then smiles in public, that she tells him again and again that he's the problem until he believes it. These tactics aren't rare, they're learned, sometimes passed from mother to daughter, sometimes inherited through culture, sometimes born in trauma. Women are not the enemy, but they're not helpless either. They're powerful. And when that power is unconscious, it becomes dangerous. Just like male violence, female cruelty can be intentional or instinctive, but the effect is the same: destruction. Some women use children as weapons. Some rewrite truth to win sympathy. Some lie, not out of malice, but out of fear, and still ruin lives in the process. Men have lost homes, reputations, futures, all without laying a hand on anyone, all without a voice to defend themselves. This is not revenge. This is not justice. This is imbalance. The feminist movement brought light to female pain, and that was necessary. But where is the light for male pain? Where is the protection for men who are silently breaking? The numbers are there, but numbers don't cry. Numbers don't bleed. Men do. And the more we pretend it's not happening, the deeper the wound grows, not just in them, but in all of us. Because every culture that ignores half the truth begins to rot from within. There is no healing without honesty, and no honesty without the courage to look where it hurts most. The most dangerous woman is not the one he dates, marries, or obsesses over. She lives deeper, inside, hidden beneath layers of personality, memory, instinct. Carl Jung gave her a name: the anima. She is not a fantasy. She is the inner feminine, the emotional blueprint buried in every man. She is feeling, desire, chaos, beauty, unpredictability. And when she remains unknown, she becomes a tyrant. Men who don't recognize the anima project her onto real women. Suddenly, a stranger becomes the one. A pretty face becomes a savior. A kind voice becomes a reason to change everything. This isn't love, it's possession. And not by her, by his own unconscious. He doesn't see the woman, he sees a symbol. And once she becomes a symbol, he stops relating to her as a person. He needs her, craves her, obeys her, not because she's powerful, but because she reflects a forgotten part of him. This is how obsession starts: addiction, worship. And when she fails to live up to the fantasy, when she shows flaws, moods, independence, he feels betrayed, not because she lied, but because the illusion shattered. His internal world cracked open, and the truth steps in. It was never about her. It was about him. About the mother he longed for, but never fully had. About the girl he couldn't save. About the emotional hole left unfilled for years. The anima carries all of that, and if he doesn't meet her within, he will bleed for her without. This is why some men lose everything over a woman, not because of who she is, but because of what she activates. She whispers, not with words, but through moods, through music, through poetry, through the feeling of needing something you can't name. And that whisper leads men to wars, to fame, to madness, or to awakening. The anima can destroy a man, or she can transform him, but only if he stops chasing her outside and starts facing her inside. He must descend into his own darkness, face his fears of weakness, softness, need, admit his longing, admit his brokenness, admit that he's been blaming women for what was always his to face. When he does that, she changes. She stops haunting and starts guiding. She becomes a muse, not a master, a mirror, not a trap. Only then can he see women clearly, without illusion, without fear, without the need to control or surrender. Only then does he become whole, because he is no longer ruled by the inner woman he never understood. He knows her, he honors her, he listens, but no longer obeys blindly. And in that balance, he finds his true power. She walks in beauty, but not always in peace. She inspires, but not always to create. Some truths about women have lived in myths, whispered across centuries, masked as fantasy. But they weren't fantasies, they were warnings. Stories men once told each other not to control women, but to survive them. In ancient Greece, the sirens didn't lure sailors just with music. They exposed the weakness in men who could not resist the call of the feminine. Odysseus survived only by being tied to the mast, ears plugged. Not because women were evil, but because their power bypassed logic and pierced straight into soul. In Slavic folklore, there's Rusalka, the beautiful water spirit who appears gentle and grieving, yet pulls men under when they come too close. She is trauma masked as tenderness, grief that turns into rage, a feminine force that doesn't speak, it drowns. In Norse legend, Freya is both goddess of love and war. In Hindu texts, Shakti creates universes but also consumes them. Across every culture, the woman is never just lover or mother. She is also destroyer, not out of malice, out of nature. Modern minds reject these stories. Myths, they say, symbolism. But look closer. Today's Rusalka lives in the woman who draws him in with softness, only to punish his vulnerability. Today's siren exists in the endless stream of curated beauty, seductive glances, digital intimacy, feeding addiction, fantasy, escape. She whispers not through song, but through screens. She doesn't have to cast a spell. The spell is already in his mind. And still, the culture insists women are harmless. They are oppressed, not powerful. They need saving, not boundaries. And so men ignore the signals until they are lost, shamed, drained, forgotten. There are things women know but never say out loud. That attention is currency. The tears move mountains. that silence controls better than screaming, that sex isn't always about pleasure. Sometimes it's negotiation. Sometimes it's strategy. These aren't accusations. They are patterns, archetypes in motion. Not every woman uses them, but every woman carries the potential. Just like every man carries the potential for violence, control, ambition. The danger isn't in the gender, it's in the denial. And so the myth continues. The myth of the gentle goddess, the myth of the fragile soul. And men keep falling, not because she lies, but because he wants the myth to be true. He wants to believe she will heal him, complete him, love him without condition. But she isn't built to complete him. She is built to reflect him. And if he is empty, she will show him that emptiness. This is the last truth. She is the final test, the mirror of his evolution. If he stands in front of her, still a boy, she will devour him, not with hatred, with nature, with instinct. But if he meets her as a man, whole, awake, sovereign, she cannot destroy him, because he no longer needs her to be less than she is. He no longer fears her depth, her chaos, her fire. He sees it, honors it, and stands tall. And in that moment, the myth shatters, not because it was false, but because he no longer needs it. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.